Okay, there we go. So good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here this evening. I am Connie Kohlmeyer. I've got my name in the box there, just says the Conservation Foundation, but my name is Connie. I'm an educator with the Conservation Foundation, and we've had a lot of people tuning in over the past couple of years with Jamie. So if you were able to catch our February webinar, then you may already know that she's no longer with the Conservation Foundation. She's off on an exciting new adventure in a new position, but I'm sure she'll still be partnering with us in other ways. And I know she's still doing great conservation work. So she did a really good job getting these webinars going. So I just want to thank her for all of her hard work and wish her good luck in her new position. And I will now be picking up the hosting duties, and we'll have some other TCF employees also hopping on, who I'm sure you'll be familiar with. And so we were kind of joking, I'm now your redheaded webinar host 2.0. We're joking that it's apparently a prerequisite of the job. You must be a redhead to host the webinars for the Conservation Foundation. So I will be picking that up. And I have presented a couple of webinars with Jamie in the past. So you might have seen me on here, but as a presenter, not as the host. So I'm excited to join you now as the host and going forward. So with that, we're going to go ahead and begin and get started. I've got a few announcements, and then we'll turn it over to Sam. I'm excited to hear what he's going to talk about tonight about O'Hara Woods. So this webinar, as you see, is being recorded for everyone to enjoy later on. And Itasca Bank is sponsoring this webinar. We'd like to thank Itasca Bank for their sponsorship. Sponsors like Itasca Bank help to keep these webinars free for everyone. And you can contact us at the Conservation Foundation if you would like to be a sponsor or for more information on sponsoring. You can also help personally. Everybody can help pitch in and keep these webinars free. After the webinar, you'll be taken to a screen that has resources and links. And there's information in there about there's a native plant guide, rain barrel information, all kinds of good information on that screen. There's a virtual tip jar. And if you enjoy the webinars, we do appreciate donations to help support them and keep them going, and to help support all of the other amazing things that the Conservation Foundation does in addition to the webinars. You can become a member. And this year is a very special time to become a member. We are celebrating the Conservation Foundation's 50th anniversary. And so we've got all kinds of fun things in the works for our members this year as part of that celebration. So it's a great time to become a member. And you can always follow us on social media platforms, Facebook and Instagram, in order to keep up and get more information if you're on social media. So we do also, speaking of fun things coming up, I've got a few announcements for April. We've got a lot of really fun things happening. First of all, I'll mention our next webinar for next month is going to be on Wednesday, May 4th at 7 p.m. And for that one, we're going to be learning about some common tree care misconceptions. And we'll learn about some of the things that we may have learned about taking care of our trees and how they might not be the best practices. And we'll learn the best ways that we can take care of our trees at home and find out what all the current best practices are. So Julie Janoski of the Morton Arboretum will be joining us to present on that. And so we'll learn how to take care of our trees in next month's webinar. And then April 21st, we have our annual Earth Day benefit coming up. That's going to be at Bobac's signature events, and tickets are available right now on the website. And I will put links for these things in the chat also, so that you can get more information. This benefit dinner, though, this benefit event is a critical source of funding for the important work that the Conservation Foundation does in protecting our local natural areas and land and waterways. And we hope that you'll be able to join us. And as I mentioned, with it being the 50th anniversary, it should be a big celebration and a fun event this year. So that'll be a lot of fun. We hope you can join us. It's also the time of year for our very popular and much anticipated annual plant sale. So we have online pre-ordering for our native plants is going to be starting on the website on April 11th for members and for Green Earth Harvest Farm shareholders. And then the plant ordering will open up to the general public the following day on April 12th. for everyone else. So another good reason to be a member. You get first crack at the ordering there, and a lot of these things have in the past sold very quickly. So that's a really nice perk to be able to get the pre-orders in. And then we have our organic vegetable seedling sale, and ordering for that will begin online on May 5th. So this year, again, like last year, this will be online ordering and then contactless pickup. So we won't be doing an in-person, just go choose, peruse and look through the plants and pick them out that way. It will all be pre-ordering online and then pick up afterwards. And then also coming up in April, we would love for you to bring your kids out to the farm to come see me and the other educators. And we've got a really fun new program happening. We have our new Club Nature program, which is a really fun after-school outdoor nature club. It's going to be for elementary school aged children, and it runs for 4 weeks beginning April 28th. We've got some really fun topics, different themes that we'll have fun with the kids, like compost critters, starting seeds and growing gardens, and wetland wonderland. So we've got a lot of really fun activities planned. And if you know a child who would be interested in activities like that, like the after school nature club, they would probably also really love our summer camps, and registration is open online right now also for summer camps. So yeah, we would love to have your kids come and join us at the farm. And so with that, all of our fun announcements, I'm going to go ahead and introduce Sam. I'm going to turn it over to him. So some of you already know him and have worked with him, it sounds like, and even out at O'Hara Woods. So he is a land steward, and he's been leading our volunteer days and our work days out at O'Hara Woods for the past couple of years. And so he knows all about what's been going on there, and he's going to be able to tell us about the O'Hara Woods project and the transformations that are happening there. So while Sam is presenting, again, if you have questions, go ahead and put them in the Q&A, and we will we'll chat about those and get some of those answered at the end of the presentation. Sam, I'll turn it over to you.
Awesome. Well, thanks for the intro, Connie. Hi, everybody. Can we see this okay? Should be able to. I will proceed as if we can then. My name's Sam Kilgore, as mentioned, and I've been leading the workdays out at O'Hara Woods Nature Preserve since about the end of 2020, a couple months left in 2020. And I'm really excited to share about the work and a little bit about the history of the stewardship that's been done out there. So let's get right into it. First, a little bit of background on the Conservation Foundation. You've been to these webinars before. You've very likely seen this. We are an ecological not-for-profit based with the mission to improve the health of our communities by preserving and restoring natural areas and open space, protecting rivers and watersheds, and promoting stewardship of our environment. We are proudly accredited. We did a lot of work to get this accreditation since 2019, and it's only awarded to conservation agencies that meet the highest standards for conservation permanence. We primarily work in an 8-county area in DuPage, Kane, Kendall, and Will counties. Those are our 4 main core counties, but we're also working a little bit less or in a little bit smaller extent in Cook, DeKalb, LaSalle, and Grundy counties. And our headquarters is at McDonald Farm in Naperville, which is where you'll pick up the plants, I believe, where you can pick up the plants for the plant sale if you order there. We have preserved some 35,000 acres in our 50 years, right, across nearly 200 parcels, including 45 conservation easements. And as mentioned, we're working in 8 counties. So generally, why is this important, right? We believe that conserving open space lands plays a very important role in preserving our quality of life. Open space along rivers protects water quality. That includes drinking water. Open space improves our air quality, as well as preserves habitat for wildlife and native plants. Open space creates opportunity for people to get outside and enjoy the outdoors. And finally, we strongly believe that we have a responsibility to protect and steward and preserve this land for future generations. So that's a little bit of background. Moving forward to O'Hara Woods, before I get started on the presentation proper, I want to read the land acknowledgement statement that we have crafted. We, the Conservation Foundation, and the landowner, the Village of Romeoville, have crafted for O'Hara Woods specifically. Quote, "We want to acknowledge that O'Hara Woods sits on the traditional lands of numerous native tribes. Natural landscapes like the small fragment that is O'Hara Woods were managed and cared for by Native people until their removal following the signing of the 1830 Indian Removal Act. It's important to acknowledge and to honor those who have stewarded the land before us, right? It's very important to understand that people have always been working in these lands, right? Thousands of years, there have been people here working and taking care of places like O'Hara Woods. All right, so getting right into it. O'Hara Woods is a 125-acre woodland in northern Will County, Romeoville, Illinois. It is renowned for its diverse spring ephemeral blooms and rich soil, which supports many mature oak trees, ash trees, and sugar maples, among a lot of other stuff. It's located in the morainal section of the Northeastern Morainal Division of the state. That's kind of a mouthful, but basically what I want you to know from this is the Northeastern Morainal Division, right? It's this section, I'm not sure if you can see my mouse, but this section in the top or in the northeastern corner of the state is the part of the state that most recently had glaciers on it and saw glacial activity, right? This region is identified by its glacial structures like moraines, cames, rolling uplands, and some ravines, right? We see some of these structures at O'Hara Woods. Looking a little bit at a map of today, right? We can see that O'Hara Woods is located between I-55 and I-355 in northern Romeoville. And looking at some geographic features, it is located pretty much right in the middle, in between the DuPage River and the Des Plaines River. This has certainly shaped the community and the history of this place. I like to think of O'Hara Woods very broadly as this first map here, right? I like to consider this the O'Hara Woods complex, right? It includes the woods proper, which is, as you can see, everything under trees, that strange polygon in kind of the center bottom half of the larger red polygon. But everything else within the red polygon is protected open space, right? Whether that be detention basins or old fields or prairie recreations or what have you. Many of the sections outside of the woods are lower quality habitats, but nonetheless, they're protected open space, which kind of connects O'Hara Woods into a bit of a corridor in this region. Now, for my talk today, I'm going to be talking specifically about O'Hara Woods Nature Preserve, right, which is a section highlighted in yellow here. The woods is divided between two landowners. The nature preserve, the section in yellow, is owned by the Village of Romeoville, and all the woods to the west, sorry, that is not highlighted in yellow, that is owned by the countywide land management organization, the Will County Forest Preserve, right? It's really important to point out though that this is a completely human-made arbitrary boundary, right? There are no fences here, there are no hard boundaries. You'd be hard pressed to even know that this ownership change even existed, right? If it weren't for a few signs in the woods that say, hey, okay, you're in Forest Preserve land now, but it's all one connected woods that's managed in a very similar way. We're going to talk about what a nature preserve means in a little bit, right? But know that when I talk about O'Hara Woods today, I'm speaking about the nature preserve section, which is owned by the Village of Romeoville and where the Conservation Foundation has been working for the past couple of years. Okay, let's rewind the clocks a little bit. Back to 1822, 200 years ago, I made that connection just a couple days ago, right? 1822 is exactly 200 years ago. Wild. So on this 1822 map, this is the first map we have of the region. This is a public land survey from 1822, where O'Hara Woods was identified as a Mesic prairie grove, right? This map shows the Des Plaines River on the east. You can see the river is well marked there with the swampland and some timber around it. All around this little corner of woods that you see here was identified as prairie, right? Quote, this protected from prairie fires in pre-settlement times by wet soil and a steep ravine, the grove appeared to be an island of trees in the midst of a vast prairie and marsh sea. That's a quote from a nature preserve document, an IDNR document talking about the site. O'Hara Woods, this map shows that the surveyors in 1822 encountered species such as oak trees, linn, which today you might recognize as a basswood tree, ash, they're almost certainly speaking about blue ash, we'll talk about that in a little bit, and sugar tree, which is sugar maple. One other thing to mention is that there was a wetland complex or wetland structure to the north of O'Hara Woods that just touched the woods. We know from other surveys that were done after this one in 1822. This is named Lilycash Slough. And this is a wetland that has largely been developed, right? I did want to point this out as well. There is a ravine that runs through the center of the woods. Thinking back to the glacial activity here, there's a small ravine that runs from the northeast to the southwest, right? And that ravine, as well as the prairie that surrounds it, has impacted the community that is formed at O'Hara Woods, right? So historically, fires would be started, out west or just wherever, and they would follow the prevailing winds and move eastwards. Native Americans would use fire to open areas up. It's a great tool to kind of do a nice restart of an area, right? It burns all the duff away and starts things new in the spring. And fires would also start naturally from, wildfires and lightning strikes and so on. So the habitat to the west of the ravine, right, in the area that would first experience a prairie fire moving from the west, is dominated by species like oaks, right? These are trees that can handle fire. And this makes sense, right? That, the west side of the site that sees fire the most frequently and the most intensely would be the most dominated by a tree species that can handle that fire, right? To move to the other side of the ravine, on the northeastern side, you get a lot more fire sensitive species like maple trees, sugar maple trees primarily, right? We know that, all around the periphery of the woods, it was dominated by tree species such as the Bur oak, which we know is the native tree that can best handle a prairie fire. And the understory was described as having extremely rich spring flora. Moving 115 years into the future, this is the next quite good map we have of O'Hara Woods. This is from a series of aerial photographs that were taken, commissioned by the government, and taken in 1937, right? What do we see here? So we see that, the prairie has all but been destroyed, right? All of those little squares are farmland, right? But the woods appears to be kind of unchanged, right? We'll come back to that word unchanged in a little bit, but you can notice here that the woods itself looks kind of the same. It's a recognizable shape, right? The past slide showed that it was kind of a triangle with a flat top, and we can see something reminiscent to that here. Between 1937 and today, stuff got kind of busy at O'Hara Woods, right? During World War II, the United States government constructed a road and about 12 concrete bunkers in the woods that they used to house dynamite, right, under the cover of trees. The bunkers have since degraded, and this is what they look like today, right? The dynamite had obviously been taken out, and the kind of the cover of the structures, whatever it looked like, it's a little mysterious. There's no pictures of them, and we don't really have any more records other than this, that the structures are here today. But you can find about 12 foundations throughout the woods today. There was potentially some light farming into the woods. We can see this there's a couple cutouts, right? Farmers love square edges, like nice 90-degree corners. And the woods has several of those kind of cut out of them that we can see in some pretty old maps. And in 1969, the site was acquired by the Village of Romeoville. And during that time, between 1969 and today, the Village of Romeoville worked generally to do a little bit of management work. They worked occasionally with contractors to try to do prescribed fire in the site, definitely not to the extent that the site would naturally see fire, back before 1822. But their primary work was in kind of upkeep of facilities, right? They maintained the road, they built some pavilions, they really bolstered public access, which is definitely a part of the history today. O'Hara Woods is a very highly visited site. In 1982, the Village of Romeoville worked with the DNR to dedicate O'Hara Woods as an Illinois nature preserve, right? 70 acres of it was dedicated, which is for the most part the entirety of the land of O'Hara Woods that they own, right? The nature preserve system, for those unaware, is a program run by the DNR through their Division of Natural Heritage that assists private and public landowners in protecting their high quality natural areas in perpetuity through voluntary dedication, right? So it's a very prestigious thing to be dedicated as nature preserve. You need to be a very high quality natural area identified on a survey that was done, 40 or 50 years ago. And so it's very prestigious to be dedicated as a nature preserve, and it provides quite stringent legal protection to protect properties in perpetuity, right? And really the last point of note is that we got involved in 2019, right? We had applied for and received grants, firstly from CITCO, right? They're caring for our coast grant that funds much of the large scale work we can do out there. That's happened since 2019. And just last year, we received another grant from the IDNR, their Natural Areas Stewardship Grant, that also helps fund work out there. So thank you to both Citco and the state for funding this work. Couldn't be done without you. Okay, so in 2012, the Village of Romeoville, I believe it was, hired a contractor to do some surveys on site, right, to see what was there. They wanted to assess what plant communities were there, as well as kind of what the ecology of the site looked like. And their survey resulted in several maps that look pretty similar to this, that show 5 main divisions of community of the site. And this is, I'll talk about this quite briefly in terms of what's present at the site today. We're going to use this as a baseline for what the site looks like today. The majority of O'Hara Woods, they identified as Mesic upland forest, Mesic referring to the soil conditions, not too wet, not too dry, and upland forest referring to the plant communities that are there, right? So all that's in green here has been identified as old second growth forest, right? With a canopy of largely red oak, sugar maple, and blue ash, right? Blue ash is a species of ash tree, obviously, that is quite an uncommon canopy species, right? It's a high quality, it's one of the highest quality, most conservative ash species we have. And so, having it as a canopy tree is very unusual. And the 1822 survey spoke about this as well, right? It identified ash as a dominant species here. So that's a really kind of quirky feature about the site that has shaped a lot of the history of it. Their survey in this section identified lots of deadfall, which contributes to the formation of very rich soil that supports these trees and all the spring ephemerals that are present on site. The ground is covered with said spring ephemerals in the spring, but it's quite bare during the rest of the year. Summer and fall, there's really not a whole lot going on. And there are minor threats here, much less so than you would expect at a woods of this size. And they primarily include invasive species like garlic mustard, invasive buckthorn, invasive honeysuckle, and so on. This is a photo of the bluebells in the spring. It's quite astounding, right? It's hard to walk through this place, if you go there during the right time. And then this is a picture in September, right? The spring ephemerals have naturally died back for the year, and the soil is generally open throughout much of the site. So the next section the next community they identified is wet mesic floodplain forest. So kind of wet soils and floodplain forest, referring to the canopy trees. Trees such as sugar maple, basswood, green ash, and hackberry. These are all water-loving, kind of disturbance suited plant species, right? The understory has plants such as skunk cabbage and jewelweed and grape lobelia, again, all water-loving, stream-loving plants. And in this section, erosion can be a little problematic, as seen from this picture. There's a little bit going on here. There are definitely a bit more erosion in other sections, but this section also has some light issues with invasive brush and invasive garlic mustard, and then trash accumulation is a unique issue here, right? The streams have been quite channelized, right? There's a lot of impermeable surfaces around O'Hara Woods, and so oftentimes trash just gets funneled right into the woods that we gotta take care of. The next sections identified are northern flatwoods. These are these 4 pink or kind of cream colored polygons within otherwise green habitat on the map. These are really similar to that Mesic upland forest, the other green habitat around it, but they were mainly differentiated on this survey by the presence of old swamp white oaks, right? Swamp white oaks are a good characteristic that you have this northern flatwoods community. But other than that, right, the understory is very similar. The canopy shares a lot of the same trees, just in addition to swamp white oaks, right? The understory has species like, it's got several sedge species, which is kind of another unique feature here. And same old story with this section. It has similar pressures to the Mesic upland forest. Pretty light invasive species, diverse spring ephemerals, and kind of bare the rest of the year. This red section on top was identified as marsh. This is remnants of that wetland that I spoke about that has been destroyed, Lilycash Slough, that has been largely destroyed, I believe. And this is by far that most heavily disturbed section of the site, right? There are, the canopy is dominated by very aggressive tree species like willows, silver maple, box elder, and black walnut. The understory is chock full of invasive species like reed canary grass, garlic mustard, honeysuckle. And this is by far the most disturbed and kind of lowest quality section of the woods, just based on the history, right? This is the section that is that was kind of budding up right to farm fields, right? And so that likely had impacted the plant community. It certainly has. Finally, the last community that was identified in the survey is wet Mesic upland forest. This is a transitionary habitat between the green Mesic upland forest and the red marsh habitat. So being a transitionary habitat, we see kind of an accumulation of both species. We have marsh canopy trees like black walnut, hackberry, green ash, and we also have Mesic upland forest canopy species like red oak, sugar maple that we see in the other section. Being kind of a transitionary habitat between the very degraded section and the really high quality section, we use this kind of as like a buffer to keep the invasives out, and we try to do management work along this to really kind of keep the invasive species out of the highest quality sections. This is pressured from the marsh with reed canary grass, garlic mustard, honeysuckle, buckthorn, etc., in moderate numbers. So then versus now, right? Then being 1822 or earlier, and now being today, right? O'Hara Woods has changed quite a bit in that time. Obviously, there has been a harvesting of old growth. We know that settlers and just folks who were, building some of the first structures around the woods harvested the wood either for timber or for directly building their homes and those structures that they needed to build. The most obvious change is to the destruction of the continuous habitat. It used to be described as a small island of trees in an otherwise sea of prairie. The prairie's gone, right? We now only have this small little connection of recreated, pretty low quality habitat. So that's a big change that's happened to the woods. Additionally, within this time, this is when invasive species were introduced: garlic mustard, buckthorn, honeysuckle, reed canary grass, etc. But this is kind of what happened statewide and really countrywide, right? This is the time when invasive species in large part started to be introduced. The main change to the wood is a direct result of a history of fire suppression, right? I want to read you a quote from that survey that the contractor did in 2012. Quote, "Collectively, these observations, including the abundance of sugar maple, poor oak regeneration, and abundant deadfall, indicate that even the best parts of O'Hara Woods are seceding to a less diverse community, completely dominated by shade-tolerant trees such as basswood and especially sugar maple, and characterized by an herbaceous layer with only spring wildflowers, especially ephemerals. This process has been ongoing for some time." So this is what's happening to the woods, right? It's generally getting less diverse, which is really how fire suppression statewide has impacted woodlands here. We're going to talk a little bit about how fire suppression changes woodlands generally in Illinois. Fires are and were a very important shaper of ecological communities. Prairies are generally treeless because fires would roll through every year or two and scorch all the trees, so they couldn't have, the trees couldn't live there. Woodlands are the same way, although it's a little less obvious how fires have shaped woodlands. So infrequent fires into the woods. So if we think back to 1822, right, a fire would be moving from the west to the east, and it would slam into the western side of the woods and slow down and kind of creep through the woods and generally stop at the ravine. Sometimes it would hop over and creep to the other side as well. But those fires stopped either it was after 1822 and before 1937, right? Sometime between when the surveyors came through and there was still prairie there, and when those prairies have been destroyed, right? Once the prairies are destroyed, the fires stop coming. So once a fire stops in a woods, the fire-sensitive trees, like maple trees and ash trees, start to get way more abundant, right? These trees are generally kept in check by fire because they've got thin bark and they really can't survive a fire, right? And this thereby selects for the tree species that can survive the fire: oaks and hickories, which is the dominant canopy of the state. Oak trees are the dominant species at O'Hara Woods. And so without fire, the canopy changes, right? The proportion of tree species in the overstory changes. It fills up with maples, right? Maples and ash trees that grow way faster than oak trees, and they produce a ton more seeds, right? So generally, levels of shade goes up. The woods get darker and more shady. And when that happens, all the understory plants that have thrived on and needed dappled sunlight on the forest floor for thousands of years, they all of a sudden don't have that sunlight, right? It got really dark. And so those shade intolerant species start to disappear. Generally speaking, across the state and the Midwest, when fire stops, woodlands get less diverse, right? The canopy fills up with maples and ash trees, and the understory starkly changes. Most of our work at O'Hara Woods aims to address this history of fire suppression. This is a 1939 map. I zoomed in on it so you can see in the western side, there's nice open space between these trees. You can see right down to the ground. And in the kind of the southern section of it, the middle section of it, the trees they look a little bit smaller and a little bit further apart than they do on the east side, right, on the right side. Now let's toggle that between then and today, right? This is what the woods looks like today. It looks like dominant, closed canopy, can't see the ground anywhere, right? I mean, I just want to flip through these real quick. Lots of space on the west, almost no space on the west, right? This is how fire has changed the woods. We totally see what is expected here when the fire stops. So what are we doing to address this, right? What are we doing to address the changes of the woods? The Village of Romeoville has been working periodically between 69 and 2019 to do some of this restoration work. They would infrequently do some burns with a contractor, but again, not nearly enough to sustain the level of fire that the woods needs. We talked about that a little bit. Once we got involved in 2019, we brought some funds in from these DNR and the Sitco grants, which is really kind of the limiting factor oftentimes in terms of restoration work. And we are working with the Village of Romeoville, we're working in tandem to take a two-pronged approach to the restoration work of the woods, right? We are working with hired ecological contractors to do some of the larger scale clearing. And we're also working with volunteers doing monthly work days on some of the smaller scale, more fine scale stuff. The main issues we are aiming to address at O'Hara Woods are as follows, right? The dense native canopy and the alterations to the canopy in the understory that we talked kind of at length about a slide or two ago. Moderate invasive species in the understory, whether that be invasive brush or invasive garlic mustard or reed canary grass. The buckthorn and honeysuckle populations are quite low here. So it's really predominantly garlic mustard and reed canary grass, but there's buckthorn everywhere to fight, right? And lastly, just kind of a variety of other issues as they arise. So speaking to the contractor work, what our hired contractors are doing, we bring them in to do some of the larger scale clearing of the woods, right? They are the primary folks that are addressing the long-term community changes that we see to the woods, the abundance of large maple trees in the canopy, as well as some huge deadfall on the floor. This picture here is a really good example of what we see. You see, the first thing I see at least, is a ton of dead wood on the ground. This is one huge oak tree that has died and fallen to the ground. And ordinarily, this tree would last for some time, but the fires would eat it away every once in a while. But the woods is chock full of this brush, as you'll see in some other pictures I have coming up. The second thing I see is that if you look just maybe 40, 50 feet into this picture, there is an abundance of like these gold maple trees that are totally shading out the understory. This is the large scale work they're doing, a combination of selectively cutting some larger trees to make some holes in the canopy that fire naturally would, and clearing up some of the deadfall. The deadfall is an important part of the soil formation of O'Hara Woods. There's just way too much of it. If you ever go out to the woods in the winter time or when there are no leaves, this is the first thing you see, that like for every one tree standing, there's practically one tree on the ground. That's obviously hyperbole, but there is too much deadfall and we aim to address it. So like I said, our contractors are doing selective canopy thinning, targeting primarily basswood, elm trees, maple trees, not really big ash trees, because we know they are a unique part of the site. We want to encourage that these ash trees, thrive at O'Hara Woods, but we are just selectively removing some of the other non-oak species to make some dappled sunlight, to allow some dappled sunlight to get to the floor and make some space for oak regeneration. The goal of this work, the simultaneous canopy thinning and deadfall clearing and kind of cleaning up, is to ultimately facilitate a prescribed fire in the future, right? Our main goal is to return fire to the site on a schedule, a 3 to 4 year, maybe 5 year schedule, where the whole site gets burned or half of it gets burned one year, half of it gets burned the other year. That's a more ideal management work there. So that's what the contractors are working on, some of the larger scale work. At our monthly work days, the monthly volunteer work days, we are working with volunteers on some of the finer scale, the smaller scale projects that are equally as important. We've hosted these work days since September 2019. There was some global event that happened in early 2020, right? That slowed us down, definitely. The COVID, early COVID lockdowns shut us down for 9 months or a year, I believe it was. But we started them back up in late 2020 and have been working monthly ever since with a sizable group of volunteers on a variety of tasks. Invasive species removal, brush clearing, trash pickup, site survey, and kind of whatever else comes up for us. This group is dubbed the Friends of O'Hara Woods Nature Preserve. The most dedicated and active volunteers get hats, right, which are quite exciting. Make it official, right? So this is a great group that we work a lot with. And I wanted to really quickly run through kind of what we do at these work days. In November, this was our first work day back since we had been away from the site for about a year from the COVID pandemic. Some kids had built bike jumps through the woods. Looked like a great time. But we worked to kind of resculpt them into the soil. They're very destructive to the plants and just the restoration, the reestablishment of an understory of the woods. So we worked to sculpt them back into the woods. December of 2020 through March of 21, it was a lot of brush clearing, both invasive brush clearing of like buckthorn and honeysuckle, but also selective thinning of small maple trees, small elm trees, and small ash trees. And during this time, we also did a little bit of trash pickup. In April of 2021, we did a BioBlitz. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later, so hold that thought for 1 second. Between May and June of 21, we did a lot of trash pickup on our one dedicated kind of spring cleaning trash pickup day. I think we got between 25 and 30 contractor size garbage bags full of trash. Huge haul. The catch of the day was a TV. One of our volunteers, Chris, the group he was leading, pulled out a tube TV. I don't know how it got back there, but it's not there anymore. Around the same time frame, we did a site-wide garlic mustard sweep. Garlic mustard is generally kind of concentrated in several areas, but we walked the whole site for it, right? Walked all 70 acres looking for garlic mustard. We found quite a bit, mostly in isolated pockets on the edges and in the marsh, but that was a very productive day. Garlic mustard is an annual species that is easily hand-pulled, and it's an annual project that we'll need to do yearly. July to September, did more brush clearing, right? This is the main project we do out here because it's the main issue we have, right? Being the summer, it was a little bit too hot to light some fires. Nobody wants to stand around a hot fire on a 85-degree summer morning, right? So we just piled stuff up, either had the village chip it or left piles to be cleared later, to be burned later, which is what we did in October. We condensed like 40 or 50 of the piles that we made into about 4 fires, really kind of just showing the extent of the work we've done. October was a big day for the work days. So between November of last year and this past workday in March, we did brush cutting and pile burning. We did deadfall cleanup, right? The contractors are doing some of the larger scale stuff, but we can pick up some like a couple inch big logs and small trees that have fallen down to help facilitate that process. We're going to pull garlic mustard at future work days once that's up in about a month or two, maybe 2 or 3 months. And then once the site has started to respond, once we see the understory start to come back, we're going to work on projects, I'm hoping, such as native seed collection and redistribution. We can help collect some seed from an area that's responding well and move it 100 feet to the next area that needs a little bit of help. That'll just help speed things along. So what's happened? What's the response we've seen? Well, most excitingly, the understory has started to return in our main area of work. This is that before picture I showed, a lot of deadwood, ton of maples. Here's after, right? Check this out. There's space between the trees. There's sunlight coming down to the soil. Mind you, this is in the area that experienced the most fire frequently. So this area should be a little bit thinner than other areas. But we're seeing stuff start to come back. This is an October picture, I think, and maybe a November picture. And there's plants in the understory. This is not common. The woods hasn't seen this in 100, maybe 150 years. This is really exciting. In addition to the response of the understory, which is our main goal, we've also seen public access go up. This might be due to the COVID pandemic, but I like to think that it's also in part due to the fact that people are seeing other people working in the woods, working to take care of the woods. And on that note, attendance has gone up. At our first workday in September of 2019, we famously got like 3 people to show up and help us cut some brush. At our last workday in March, we had 30 people. So that's a 10 times increase in just a year and a half or so, maybe 2 years. How exciting is that? I think that's, yeah, 2.5 years. My math is bad. Lastly, the general disturbances we see are going down pretty expectedly, right? We're seeing a little bit less trash produced at the site, just kind of blown in. People are kind of thinking that like, oh, this is a woods that, you know, there are things happening here. It's not a forgotten lot, right? So maybe I should find a garbage can. We haven't found any more bike jumps since we took those down, which is also great. A little case study I wanted to talk about that we're super excited about is that just literally at our last workday, I think it was 2 weeks ago, we identified a species that has never been seen at O'Hara Woods before. It's called Harbinger of Spring. This is a very high quality a spring ephemeral plant species that's an indicator of really high quality woodlands that has never been recorded at O'Hara Woods before. This map that I have here is from a really great resource, Illinois Wildflowers. It's a database run by U of I. And this is kind of the range map for the species. You can see in the northern half of the state, it's present just kind of in this couple county area that we're in. And so we knew it was present at sites around here, but it had never been found at O'Hara Woods before. How exciting is that, right? This is coincidentally, or maybe not coincidentally, this was found in the area that we had most heavily done management work, right? It was in that area that we had done a lot of our clearing in. So this is a direct evidence that the work we're doing is benefiting the site, right? We're seeing changes. We're finding things that we've never seen in the woods before. This plant has certainly been here for hundreds, thousands of years. But, you know, once fire stopped, once the woods started to get choked up a little bit more with brush and shade, it, you know, took a back seat. It's like, these aren't the conditions I need. Let's, you know, I'm gonna not flower this year, or maybe that was the story. But since we're working in here, we're starting to see more plants like this return, which is so exciting. And like I said, this is a newly identified species at O'Hara Woods. Very cool. So the BioBlitz that I talked about in 2021, April of 2021, we held our first ever O'Hara Woods BioBlitz. For those uninitiated, which I'm knowing the audience I'm speaking to, I'm sure most of you know what this is. A BioBlitz is an event focused at finding and identifying as many species as possible in a specific area over a short period of time. It's a citizen science project where you just get a big group of people out and I told the folks last year to get lost in the woods, right? Take pictures of what you see. This is the first ever BioBlitz at O'Hara Woods. And it was held in April to capture much of that spring ephemeral diversity that the site's so well known for. The observations were taken in iNaturalist, which again, just very briefly on that, iNaturalist is a free to use phone app that uses image recognition and your location and time of year to help you identify what you found. It's really great because you can also post to like a master list, one that I created for the woods, and people like myself or other knowledgeable naturalists in the area can help confirm or reject and propose another identification for a plant, for an organism that you found. So you take a picture of a mushroom, you say it's this because that's what the algorithm had recommended, and then somebody can comment, oh, it's actually this, and here's how to tell why. It's a great app that is very good for allowing folks with really no identification knowledge to get out into an area and help tell you what you saw. The goals for our 2021 BioBlitz were to really get a baseline of what's present at the woods and where it's found. In 2012, we got kind of a high level survey of what's at the woods. We know that there's populations of this here, and generally the canopy looks like this, but I wanted to know, and we generally wanted to know, like, is there like what does the woods look like? What does the plant community look like? Are there amphibians at the woods? Are there birds that are nesting here that we don't know about? Is there a plant population of species X, let's say Harbinger of Spring, present at the woods that that we didn't know about before? And you can then use that information to kind of direct the management work. So say that Harbinger of Spring, is responding to brush cutting and kind of the approach of trying to return fire to an area, brush cutting and deadfall cleanup. We can go to that population if this observation were in iNaturalist and expand the work area around it to help bolster the population of that plant. Those are the main goals. And lastly, of course, I find it very important to encourage volunteers to go back to the areas where they've done such hard work and see, right? Go back to that area where you found the TV, right? Wow, look, remember that TV? That sucked to pull out of there. Look how good it looks without it, right? I want experiences like that for the volunteers who work so hard through this woods. This is what we found. The metrics for the BioBlitz last year. We had between 30 and 35 participants show up the day of. And in total on the day, we had 200 observations taken. This number is certainly artificially depressed. We had some technical issues with, I think, adding to the list or just posting the observations in general, which were kind of a bummer. But in total, observations taken either before the BioBlitz or after, we've had 650 observations taken at O'Hara Woods. And of those 650 observations, we've identified 224 species, which is way more than I had expected to get, right? Just in a couple of years, really a couple of years of surveys of the site. This chart right here shows really what's represented in the iNaturalist app, right? The majority of species present that we have identified are plants. This makes sense, right? Plants are easy to take pictures of. They don't move when you trying to take a picture of it. And doing the BioBlitz in the spring was the goal was to let's take pictures of the beautiful wildflowers, right? The next most represented group are fungi, right? There are a lot of mushroom species at the site. Got some pictures of them a little bit later on. And then lastly, about 20%, maybe 25%, 22% of the observations were either birds and reptiles or insects and arachnids, right? So here's some pictures. I could not do this presentation without some of the great pictures that we took. These are the 15 most observed species at O'Hara Woods. Number one being the Virginia bluebells. I think I've showed a couple pictures of what the site looks like with the bluebells. It's astounding, right? But also plants like mayaples and skunk cabbage, rue anemone, Dutchman's breeches. These are all abundant species at O'Hara Woods. We've got the mushrooms like this dryad saddle. That one's very common. And then there's a ton of deer at O'Hara Woods. That's something I didn't really get into, but a lot of deer in the woods. Moving on to my next slide. Sorry, these are a little laggy with the amount of pictures I have in them. Some of the plants we saw are starting on the top row, plants like mayapple. This is a spring ephemeral that looks like little umbrellas that come out of the soil. Really cute when you see them. Beautiful cream white flower underneath the leaves. High quality plants like this purple cress, bluebells, like I talked about. The bottom row are plants like yellow violet. And then the two middle pictures on the bottom are Dutchman's breeches, named that because somebody thought that the flowers looked like a pair of pants. I got to squint to see it, but very attractive and very high quality wildflower. My favorite find, which is very abundant, it's one of my favorite wildflowers on the site, are the two pictures on the right. This is an annual spring ephemeral called false mermaid weed. Doesn't look like much. That's a full-grown plant in the hand of whoever took that picture right there. But if you get in real close, the flowers can be quite beautiful, right? In a very simple sense. Really cool plant. Next, we have, there we go. Plants like brittle ferns, right? Sedges. The two top center pictures are a picture of a sedge species. More ephemerals like spring beauty, flowering redbud trees on the bottom left, and skunk cabbage. Skunk cabbage is in the arum family. So if you've ever seen one of the corpse flowers that botanic gardens have that smell really bad, the skunk cabbage is in the same, in the same grouping, in the same family. It has a similar strategy, right? They smell pretty bad, but they're a neat and quite unusually attractive find here. Lastly, we've got some red trillium on the bottom right. Some of the trees that we found, these aren't at the BioBlitz. These are taken other times a year, but that picture in the top left is a blue ash. The high quality ash species that is characteristic of the woods. Blue ash is known for having square stems and kind of really winged corky bark, which is a very identifiable feature of that species. Super high quality ash species, integral part of the woods. Picture on the top right is of eastern wahoo. That's another high quality shrub, very high quality, an indicator of a nice wet woodlands. The bottom left and center picture are of hackberry, right? This is a common tree. It's oftentimes grows too aggressively. It can get very weedy, but this picture in the middle was of the biggest hackberry I'd ever seen. It was 3.5, maybe 4 feet in diameter. That's a glove on the front of it. So this was a massive hackberry, and it was growing exactly where it should, right in the marsh habitat, which is so exciting to see. That tree had to have been, I don't know, 100, 115 years old, is my guess. And lastly, talking about big trees, that picture on the bottom right is of a Bur Oak Tree right on the edge of the woods where it should be, right where the fires can, scorch it. We have a volunteer, Keith Eichhorst, who has gone way deep into the history of the woods. And he's done some dating of these trees to try to get an estimation of their age. And he has dated this tree to have germinated in 1785, right? So that's almost as old as the US. Now, there are some potential issues with dating trees using size. It can be a little bit inaccurate, depending on the growth conditions, but regardless, this is a really big, very old Bur Oak tree, a cool find right on the edge of the woods. Some of the mushrooms we found at the BioBlitz were Eastern jack-o'-lanterns in the top left, scarlet elf cups, these beautiful little bright orange cup fungi on the top right, and then dryad saddle and chocolate tube slime molds on the bottom of a log in the bottom right. That was a weird find. I've got a little video of some puffballs we found on site. These, when disturbed either by a walking animal or the wind or what have you, puff out a nice, batch of spores. Really, really neat, common find, but still a fun one to see. What else do we have? Some of the insects we saw are species like this green darner dragonfly. This is a migratory dragonfly species. It was a pretty chilly morning, so this one let us get right up close and take a picture of them. 2 spotted bumblebees were out in that BioBlitz, as well as green tiger beetles, 6 spotted tiger beetles, I'm sorry, and then green stink bugs. And lastly, some of the animals we found, I'm sure from the collection of pictures, you can tell that I'm a plant person, right? And I'm most interested in looking at the plants. But some of the cool animals we found are things like this brown snake, wood ducks, white-tailed deer, and this horned owl. Credit Jan, who's listening to this BioBlitz for those pictures. Really good pictures of that owl in particular. So I'm excited to announce that the 2nd annual BioBlitz at O'Hara Woods is coming up, April 23rd from 8 to noon. If you're interested and want to come out to the woods, we would love to have you. We meet at the loop of Beverly J. Griffin Drive. This is on the eastern side of the woods. It's a parking lot that ends in a loop. So if you type in Beverly J. Griffin Drive, it'll take you right where you need to be for all of our work days. No experience necessary. All these work days are family friendly, right? We get high school students and people from the community. A lot of retired folk like to show up and help us out at these work days. We get Boy Scouts doing required service hours, and we get groups from Yelp and BP, not BP, I'm sorry, Waste Management, that's what it was. Just groups from all over that come and help us out at these work days. So we'd love to have you. Our monthly work days are the 4th Saturday of each month from 8 to noon. And that little chart on the bottom left are all the work days that we have for the year coming up. The April one's highlighted because that's most recent, right? We'd love to have you. April 23rd, 8 to noon for our O'Hara Woods BioBlitz. If you want more info on it, you can reach out to these 2 email addresses. Cassie Hatzfeld, she's our volunteer coordinator. She's awesome. She can add you to the email list for the BioBlitz. And then Renee Frigo, she is our land stewardship manager. So she's going to be taking over the work days here moving forward. My take-home message, right, is that we would love to have you at O'Hara Woods, but more generally, it's so important to get involved at your own local preserve. I'm biased in saying this, but O'Hara Woods is really cool, and there's a lot going on here. It's a very special site, but it's not special in terms of there are sites like O'Hara Woods all over Illinois. There are sites like O'Hara Woods all over the Midwest, all over the US, all over the world, right? Every little corner of the world has a site that's cool like O'Hara Woods, and importantly, one that needs volunteer help. The work that we do in managing and restoring a place like O'Hara Woods cannot be done without a dedicated, knowledgeable, involved group of volunteers. So we'd love to have you at O'Hara Woods, but if you're not local or you want to find your own place, I strongly encourage you, right? Go find your own local preserve to do work at, because they 100% certainly need your help. And that's what I've got. I'm happy to take questions if there are any.
Thank you so much, Sam. That was really fantastic. I have so many takeaways for myself and my own. I was like jotting down notes, and yeah, that was fantastic. And I love seeing the difference. And yeah, if people have questions, go ahead and pop them into the Q&A or in the chat. I'll try to look at both. I have a question though, just to get us started off. I was curious about when you were talking about the BioBlitz last year, was that the first one that was done, or was there one even before you guys, like, was there any type of inventory or like to get a baseline level before you had, before all of these projects and all of this work was going on over the past couple of years, or was last year the first one and that's what we'll be building on and hopefully seeing more numbers, even more species and things showing up coming up?
That's a really good question. So we know that we have a moderate sized plant list from the 2012 survey that I talked about, where I got those maps from, or where those maps were based off of that 2012 survey. So we have a general idea of like what's present at the site. That does not include locations, right? So it can say there is fire pink present at the site. That's a prairie species that is pretty high quality and was kind of found in the savanna area. You haven't seen it very frequently, right? So we have a general idea of where to go to potentially find a plant like that. And we know that it's there. We know that it was found in 2012, but we don't have the location of it. And I think, so there was that survey in 2012. The DNR almost certainly has done plant inventories for this place. Being dedicated as a nature preserve, they do a pretty thorough job getting a baseline. Well, they do today. I'm not sure how thorough of a baseline they were doing in the 80s, the late 80s, right? I am certain though, they have a plant list for this place. How complete it is, I'm sure it's not complete, right? Most of the surveys that we've done were focused on just plants. And while that's exciting to me, and while we are finding new plants like the Harbinger of Spring that I spoke about as a little case study, those surveys are not comprehensive in that, it doesn't include birds, doesn't include amphibians if they're there, it doesn't include mammals, small mammals, large mammals like deer, what have you, which is all really important information to get on a BioBlitz. And so I don't think there have been previous BioBlitzes at O'Hara Woods. I could be wrong about that. There is a chance I'm wrong about that, but this is the first TCF-led, incorporated with the Village of Romeoville BioBlitz that's been done at O'Hara Woods. And so this, in a couple of weeks, that'll be the second.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's so exciting. I love to have that because I love, just the idea of even without going in and planting natives or like reintroducing things, just by removing some of the invasive species and opening up that space. And like you said, the canopy bringing in the light, and then they're just showing up. That's so encouraging. And it's really exciting to see. So that's fantastic. I love to see the progress then as it goes forward, to see how many more things are found. So,
yeah, it's really exciting.
Cool.
I have heavily focused on plants in this talk. I don't think I did so intentionally, it just kind of happened, right? But the goal of restoration generally is to provide space for biodiverse habitats to form. That includes space for plants, but also that includes space for migratory birds, breeding birds. I'm not sure, I guess I don't have any birds in my mind that like, oh, we would like to encourage this bird to stop here on its way north. But like just, like leaving standing deadfall, which is a management technique that we use, and trying to clear some spaces, for sunlight to get to the forest floor, to encourage plant communities in the understory, right? These are all things that will help the plants, but also help, a bunch of other species.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah, really exciting.
It is. Yeah, now I want to get out there. So I'm like, what am I doing on the 23rd? I have to see if I can join you guys. If not that day, then another day.
I had inadvertently scheduled the first BioBlitz during the TCF has like a pretty big Earth Day, a variety of Earth Day stuff going on. And so when I scheduled this one for Earth Day weekend, I was told pretty quickly that you're on your own for this one. So
it was a busy weekend
going on.
But hopefully we'll have a lot of people will come out to help, because that's a perfect thing to do for Earth Day. That's a great event to be a part of. We do have a question on here from Jay. He asked, can you burn sections of the woods now? And if not, what needs to be done, and how soon will sections be ready to be burned?
Yeah, really good question. I assume you're talking about like now as in like the next burn season. We have passed this burn season a little bit, just to briefly cover on that. And we're already seeing flowering plants and some insects start to emerge. So we missed the burn window at O'Hara Woods now. Woodlands generally need to be burned either in the fall or very early spring to protect against, emerging spring ephemerals and plants that would otherwise be singed for it. But yes, the other take on that question, like, are we ready to burn this upcoming fall? Let's say, yes, we are. We're really excited about that. That main work area that we have is, I'd like to say 8 or 10 acres. And that includes 2 or 3 years of moderate canopy thinning. That includes volunteer work, cutting brush. It's a slow, as well as like cleaning up of the deadfall in the understory, right? So a lot of work went into it. And yes, we are excited that we have about 8 or 10 acres on the western side of O'Hara Woods Nature Preserve that should be ready for a burn in fall 2022 or spring 23. And it's all weather dependent. The fall burn seasons usually, it can be quite temperamental. It can be very short. I think in past years, we've gotten like 2 or 3 good burn days. And so if our contractor has other, higher priority stuff lined up, then we have to wait until a little bit later on. But yes, we should have about 10 acres ready to burn, which is super exciting. That's like, we've done all the brush clearing and everything that we can to like prep for that. And we've already seen such a change. Fire can really act as a stimulating force in restorations. It can encourage stuff to grow. It can be very reinvigorating. And so we're really excited to watch it change after we get those 10 acres burned. I'll have to come back and give another webinar then, I suppose.
Exactly. Yeah, we'll need an update after that happens. That's really cool. Yeah, definitely. There was another, I thought I had a quick question, but I don't remember. I do have a comment though. I thought that slime mold was really cool, and I love your pictures. I love your photographs. So a lot of really cool things.
I had that's a life form that my naive self like couldn't even imagine existing until I try to pick up a log. Oh, what's this? And there's some strange looking thing underneath it.
Yeah.
Big shout out to Jan. She was in the chat. I don't know if she still is, but Jan so we have 650 observations in iNaturalist. Jan has taken almost 300 herself in the about year that we've done it. So Jan has gone crazy in a very good way, taking observations here. So, and many of the pictures were her. That's why I bring it up now. So,
okay. Yeah, that's great. And I love the pictures, and it's getting me excited too to want to go out right now and see all those spring flowers, all those ephemerals, that are popping up. And
well, hey,
about that time.
If you can't join us for the BioBlitz, we'd love it to have you just swing by on a Thursday afternoon or what have you to see the woods, because the spring season is very exciting. A couple weeks before April 23rd, and then for about 3 or 4 weeks after, there's a lot happening in the woods. So yeah, if you can't make the BioBlitz, we'd love to have you just come out for a visit.
Absolutely. Yeah. I hope everybody can do that. I know I'm going to plan on it now. I'm excited. I haven't been there in a while. So now I feel like, oh, it's going to be so different. So that'll be really fun. So I would definitely encourage everybody else to do the same as well. And I also want to touch back on what Sam said about finding your own little corner too. So, even people, watching this later, watch it on YouTube or seeing the recording, even if you aren't local to O'Hara Woods, go out and find your own O'Hara Woods, project, right, and go visit. I love that you said that. That was such a good point. We have these spaces everywhere, and they all need this kind of stewardship and people to take care of them. So and there's so much benefit to us too, and like you said, it's a beautiful time of year. So just go get outside.
Absolutely. The statistic I like to give with that is that like the division of IDNR biologists that manage nature preserves, there's like 8 staff people across the whole state that are doing the management work on nature preserves. And there's like, I'm sure I'm going to misquote this number, but there's like 600, 700, maybe 800 sites that those 8 biologists have to manage. Places like O'Hara Woods, right? That could use one person there every day, all year. So this work cannot get done without a dedicated and active group of volunteers. So yeah, find your own local spot. It's really exciting.
It is. Thank you for all that you've done there. And thank you for this presentation. It was amazing. And yeah, it was very informative. I learned a lot. Like I said, I was taking notes. So yeah,
I'm
I
gonna have to
appreciate
give it
a
all
lot.
back to the volunteers because I like to say that I just show up to the work days and talk with people, right? It's all the volunteers who do all the real work. I'm serious about that. So
Yeah, and
a lot of work
I can
has been done,
understand that. Yeah, our volunteers are so important. So yeah, I'll second that and definitely thank our volunteers. So thank you everyone for all of the work that's been done out there. It looks amazing. I can't wait to get out there and see it again in person myself. Yeah, thank you all. Okay, well, it's a few minutes after 8, so we're about out of time here. If we have, I'll wait for, just in case there's anybody's got one last question before we sign off. And if I don't see anything pop up here in a second, because I think there were a couple others that were answered in the course of the conversation. So
awesome.
Yeah, so I think we're good, and we'll see you next time. So I'm hoping that everybody can join some of these events for April, all the things happening at the farm and happening out in O'Hara Woods on the 23rd, and anywhere else in your community. Get out and enjoy your April, and then we'll see you back for the next webinar in May on the 4th. We'll see you the evening of the 4th at 7 p.m.
Awesome.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a wonderful evening.
So long, everyone. Thanks for showing up.
Thank you. Thank you, Sam.